Hello and welcome to Getting Political. I am your host, Jonah Steppe, and with me today I have Tommy Pope. Thank you for coming.
Glad to be here. Thanks a lot.
He is a longtime member of South Carolina's House of Representatives and recently ran for South Carolina's 5th Congressional District seat. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
All right. Can you tell our audience a little where you are from?
Yeah, I'm actually from here in Rock Hill. I grew up in Rock Hill and then down in Leslie, kind of out toward where Rock Hill High is, and then went off to college down in Columbia. Was down there about 10 years. Moved back, was elected prosecutor here, and we live up in York, out in the middle of the woods now.
All right. What was it like growing up there?
I like growing up in the country. I think one was we spent a lot of time outside. I think my parents were happy about that, to get little Tommy out of the house.
Yeah.
But I think, two, out in the country where we grew up, you had kind of a diverse group of friends. You know, it was out near the Catawba Indian reservations. I played football with those guys, you know, African-American friends. It just really kind of gave me a good, diverse upbringing. I enjoyed it.
All right. What inspired you to pursue a career in law?
I had absolutely no desire to be in law. Matter of fact, I graduated high school, and my mother was a school teacher. My father had been in law enforcement by the time he retired, over 40-something years. And so when I went off to college, Daddy said, "I want you to get an education like your mama." He said, "I don't want you to be in law enforcement." And I'm thinking, man, you don't have to worry about that. I'm heading to college. I'm going to Columbia. I'm gonna have that experience. And ironically, within a year, I was working at the state police. And so I took a job in the state police down in Columbia. Really, I did it just to move out of the dorm, because that first year, I know you wouldn't believe this, there's a lot of distractions in the dorm when you live in the dorm. Mom and Dad will appreciate knowing that. And so I knew that first year I needed to get out of the dorm so I could focus a little bit better on my grades. So I took this job at the state law enforcement division, really just to again, get out of the dorm. But what I found is a very glamorous job. I was called the phone boy. I was the boy that answered the phone. And what I found out was every other night and every other weekend when I wasn't doing that, I could do law enforcement type things. So back then I was 18 years old. You couldn't carry a pistol, but you could carry a shotgun. Now go figure that one out. But I ran with the bloodhounds. You know, like if they called, you know, like if they had a robbery or something, I ran with the bloodhounds. I worked undercover with the narcotics folks. Back then, way before CSI, we had, you know, the lab at SLED, and I would go back and watch them test, you know, bullets and things, and I fell in love with it. We now call it getting blue lights in your blood. So to go back to your question, how did I end up in the law? I had no idea. You know, the Lord just blessed me, and I rolled into it. So I did that. I was a police officer, ultimately went to law school and became a prosecutor.
All right. Have you seen the legal profession change over the years?
I have, you know, like I said, I'd never thought I would be an attorney. Matter of fact, when I ran for prosecutor here, it was in the paper and said, "Deputy with a law degree to run for solicitor." You know, so it sounds like, you know, I got my degree like at Walmart or something, you know. But what I think I've seen in the legal profession, one, in the old days, it used to be if you could go get a law degree. Now I'm shifting away from law enforcement to the practice of law. If you could get a law degree, pretty much you kind of had it made. You know, it's almost the shift you guys see now. You know, when I was growing up, having a high school degree was solid. Having a 4-year degree was great, and then, you know, law degree was icing. But now, as you know, almost everybody's going to get a 4-year degree, it feels like, and so you feel like you have to do more. So I've seen that change. And there's just the market's tough. There was kind of a dip a few years ago. I now have my own private practice law firm, and there were people that had law degrees that wanted to come be paralegals in my office just to kind of get their foot in the door. So I've seen it tighten up in that regard.
All right. You joined the state political scene back in 2010 by getting elected to the House of Representatives.
Right.
What was your motivation into getting into politics?
Okay, so I'd actually been in politics in a backwards way. You know, you and I were talking before we came on air about, you know, I moved back home when I was 29, 30 and was elected district attorney here. And that, of course, was an elected position. And I did that until 2006. And then I retired, and I decided I was going to start my law practice. I was going to do something, you know, different, something I hadn't done in my career. And within about 3 or 4 years, I just got that itch back to I'm at my best when I'm helping other people. You know, that's kind of how I get my juice. And so what happened was I always said, more so than any murder case I tried, more than anything I've done in front of a jury, convincing my wife, Kim Pope, to let me run for office again in 2010 was probably the best convincing I did. So I live, like I say, I live up toward York now. So there was an opportunity up in the York Clover area for this House 47 seat. And so I took the plunge and headed to Columbia.
All right. What are some challenges that South Carolina faces, and what are some things we can be proud of?
I think that, you know, as far as South Carolina, the demographics, people are wanting to come to South Carolina. If you notice our population growth, it's amazing. I mean, even if you had your, you know, the students at school, how many folks aren't from Rock Hill or aren't from York or whatever the case may be. I think we have the ocean, we have the mountains, we have, you know, a beautiful area. I think people are drawn here. I think, you know, although we're a small, poorer state, we're prosperous. But so I think our people and our resources are our biggest benefit. I think the biggest downside, and this is something I see from being in Columbia, we could do better on tax issues, on really a lot of the legislative issues that we wrestle with now, ethics issues, things that are kind of probably remnants of the good old boy system, you know, the way things have been for hundreds of years in South Carolina. And I think we could, with the political will and courage, we could work our way past some of those things.
All right. Having run at a state level and most recently a national level, what are some changes you have to make to your campaign to better serve the public?
I think that campaign-wise, what I noticed that, you know, I'd never really had any aspirations to, you know, to run for that federal office. I kind of got recruited a little bit, and it probably was a good education for me, the federal thing versus the state thing, because I'm more of a grassroots guy. You know, I like to talk to people. I like to help people. I like to deal with it on that level. Well, the federal race, what I noticed, it was money intensive. Yeah, and it's hard enough for me, now that you and I are buddies, it's hard enough for me to hit you up for some money for the campaign, much less call total strangers and, you know, try to solicit thousands of dollars. It was tough on the days when we would go out on the campaign trail. I like to go see people and talk to people and interact and talk about the issues. Well, they had a notebook in the car, and my whole job was to keep going down that list, calling and begging for money, and calling and begging for money. And so that was the biggest negative I saw from, you know, the federal stuff, more so than, it's there everywhere, but more so my state races, I still feel like I can, you know, kind of do the press in the flesh, man-on-man type thing. So that was the one thing I saw that probably made me happy that ultimately I didn't win. We were at the, and with my family, my wife and I were at the beach after I lost election, about 200 votes. And my wife, I was kind of joking, we're sitting on the beach, and I said, you know, if 200 more votes and we wouldn't be at the beach. And she didn't flinch. She said, 200 more votes, you wouldn't be at the beach. So apparently Kim was not going to change her lifestyle, but Tommy was. So I'm fortunate to be here now, still representing, you know, our community in Columbia, and I'm appreciative for that.
All right. How would you describe the current national political scene?
I just said I was appreciative for that, so the Lord has a plan sometimes, you know. I think there was a tremendous, and this was something I said in that federal campaign, you know, with the change that we saw with the Republicans coming in. Of course, I'm a Republican. I said during the campaign, there's a small window of opportunity. You know, you can't blame it on Democrats now because the Republicans are in charge of, you know, all the branches and all the chance to do something. I said there was a small window of opportunity to carpe diem, to seize the day, to do something with it, and unfortunately, I don't see that happening. You know, we hadn't seen it on Obamacare, we hadn't seen it on other things. I think, you know, maybe we'll see something on taxes before the ends out, but there's too much gamesmanship and division. It used to be if you were a Democrat and I'm a Republican, that it'd be us trying to one-up each other. But now, and I see this in Columbia too, our own party, it's like we undermine each other for political credit, but don't actually accomplish the things the people sent us there to do.
All right. What is your stance on the recent kneeling controversy in the NFL?
I don't fuel the fire by paying a heck of a lot of attention to it, but I'll tell you this, both my sons are in the Air Force, in the Air National Guard. My daughter-in-law's in the Air Force. I'm very involved with veterans. You know, we had the dedication over here the other day at Northwestern for the road. I am probably patriotic to a fault, and what I see and what disturbs me is it's almost like burning the flag to me. Not to be melodramatic, but the truth is a lot of sacrifice came that gave you and I the opportunity to sit here, or the person to have the chance to burn the flag. And I just think there's other ways to protest. Now, do I dispute the person's right to do it? You know, the beauty of this country is you've got the right to do whatever you want. That's why we have freedom of speech. But at some point, disrespecting those who gave us that right disturbs me. So as for me and my family, we'll always be standing up and we'll always be saluting.
All right. Do you believe the social and political divisions, especially regarding racial tensions, can be healed? And if so, how can we approach it?
I think as we all know in our day-to-day lives, this has been present for way before you and I got on the scene. I know you think I was back here during the Civil War looking at it, but I haven't been around that long. But I think to deal with those issues, and I think we're all guilty of it, and I think we're partially guilty of it because of the noise in the world. Think about how many decisions, when I grew up it was the news, but now it's the news on steroids, but it's also social media, it's all that. Think about how many opinions you form based on anything. The color of the skin, the length of somebody's hair, you know what I mean? You automatically think you know them when you really don't. So to me, I think it begins with each individual, and it's hard sometimes. We all stereotype. If you see a group of guys standing, and on the corner, you automatically associate one thing or another with them based on the way they're standing or who they're standing with or where they're located. Yeah. I think we've got to work hard as individuals to build these relationships with people regardless of the color of their skin. And the truth is, politics in the political world and the media world is not the best place to do it. The best place to do it, I mean, it's biblical. If I treat you the way I want to be treated, we're probably going to head off a lot of those negativities.
All right. President Trump recently declared the opioid crisis as a national emergency. Do you think the steps he's laid out are appropriate, and are there anything you think would work better on a local level?
I think that declaring it a national emergency is symbolic, at least from what I've seen that he did. You know, you notice there weren't like line items early on of we're going to fund this or do that. So I think it's symbolic, but I think it's needed. I think there is a crisis. I think getting underneath it, what is difficult is it's so meshed. We were talking about money in politics. It's so meshed with the pharmaceutical industry, and I mean, because again, we're not talking initially about buying heroin on the streets. We're talking about I had a car wreck and my back hurt, and the doctor prescribed meds, and I liked them so good when I got better, I couldn't quit taking them, and so there's been a push. I laugh sometimes now, just in general. Think about all you've grown up with it your whole life, but all the medicine commercials on TV. Mm-hmm. And they're playing, there are rainbows and butterflies. In the meantime, they're telling you, oh, and this could kill you, and don't do this, underneath it, So I think we've got to recognize the issue. When I was solicitor, we started a drug court. Mm-hmm. I was an old police officer, narcotics officer. I thought I knew what drug court was. We're going to have court at night, and we're going to prosecute more drug dealers. But that wasn't what it was. It was drug treatment court. And that was the most difficult thing. People would plead guilty, go into it, then they would have their time hanging over their head, the jail time. And they would get clean and start working, then they'd slip. And these folks were from all walks of life, It goes back to, we were talking about stereotyping. You think you know who the drug addict is, and it's it can be anybody. Anyway, I think the local ability to put hands-on. It kind of goes back to what we're talking about, race relations. If you can build a one-on-one, you can help somebody out. But it's a struggle, and I think the financial component of selling these medicines is certainly not helping.
All right. What legislative proposals about the Affordable Care Act do you think would work better on a local level?
You know, on a local level, when I first ran for the House back in 2010, there was a guy, and I always tell him, you know, after a certain number of years, I'm going to quit giving him credit for saying it. I'm going to act like I came up with it. But what he said on the campaign trail was that Columbia is better than Washington, and local is better than Columbia. Now, it's funny, when I'm down in Columbia, we all want to complain about Washington, but nobody wants to recognize that maybe instead of doing something in Columbia, we ought to give the locals the opportunity to do it there. I think the more things we can get out of Washington and at least get to a state level, you're just more nimble. I always say, for example, if there's an issue you got to deal with the school board, it's a heck of a lot easier for you to go to the school board meeting here with those handful of board members than it is to try to come to Columbia, where there's 124 of us just in the House and 46 in the Senate to get something done. So, you know, from a Washington standpoint and a political standpoint, I'm disappointed because everybody on the campaign trail was going to remove Obamacare as soon as they got there. And if you remember a couple years ago when President Obama was still there, the Republicans, they actually passed one and put it on his desk because they knew he wasn't going to do anything with it. So now that we know they will do something with it, it's like we're not as brave as we were to try to clean it up. Because I think ultimately what we need to do is let the free market get back involved where it needs to be. I was talking to a businessman who I believe to be you know, pretty well off affluency-wise and financially, and he was talking about retiring, and his number one concern was health care. And, you know, this is a guy you think would probably have it all covered and he wouldn't have to worry about it, and that was his number one concern. So we've got to quit being rhetorical and just do politics sound bites and try to do something about it.
All right. What do you believe are the most basic constitutional responsibilities of the federal government?
I think the number one job of the federal government is to keep us safe. You know, whether it's national security or border security or our criminal justice system, because really all those things, those freedoms, I heard one of the guys at the veterans thing the other day said, we are the land of the free because of the brave. He was talking about the military thing, but it ports over to law enforcement. I think that is really what our government in general is supposed to be there for, that then allows you and I to interact and have our own community and our own economy and all those things. And so the more things we could pull, you know, kind of dovetailing into what we said earlier, the more things we could pull out of Washington back to us on a more local level, on a more human level, I think the better we'd be.
All right. What are your goals going forward in life, professionally and personally?
Well, it won't be running for Congress if I if I have anything to say. Like I said, that experience, I'm glad the Lord presented that for us, but it really helped my family focus a little better. I kind of had mine. I'd never lost a race. I'd ran for solicitor a number of times. I'd run for the House a number of times. And so I had in my mind, well, if I lose, it's the Lord telling me, or the people telling me it's time to get out.